Flushing toilets date all the way back to the Indus River Valley civilization, back in 2000 BS. The ancient Romans, well, the wealthy ones had central heating in their homes. You can actually still see the pipes in some of the buildings at Herculanum. Sharks. Sharks as a family are older than trees. Escalators have been around since 1859, though they were called rotating stairs. The name Tiffany. It dates back to the 12th century and has actually led to a thing in writing called the Tiffany problem, because you can have a well-researched historical novel that people just don't buy into because you named your 12th century peasant Tiffany. It just sounds laughably anachronistic. The electric car is likely the first human-carrying electric vehicle with its own power source was tested along a Paris street in April 1881 by French inventor Gustave Trouve. The first crude electric car was built in the 1830s, but it was essentially a semi-functioning model. The electric car was a direct competitor to gasoline-powered vehicles until the 1920s, when roads got better. People started driving further than the range of an electric car, and the world started finding major oil reserves. Ancient Egyptians who built the pyramids. The ancient Egyptians were as old to the ancient Romans as the ancient Romans are to us. The fact that the lighter is older than the match shook my head as a kid. It also gave me the curiosity to question things that seems obvious. I don't know if this counts, but dinosaurs lived on the earth a lot longer than most people think. When you think of dinosaurs, you think of their extinction, but they roamed the earth for 165 million years. Compare that to our 6 million, and it's almost mind-boggling. At least in the modern form of humans is 200,000 years old. But if we include our humanoid ancestors, we've been here 6 million years too. I get it, dinosaurs are still around. What I meant to say was the dinosaur era. I was really surprised to discover when Oxford University was founded. They don't know the year for sure, but they know there was definitely teaching going on there in 1096. Beer is thought to be older than breadedness. Much easier to fill a jar with wheat and water, let it ferment, and brew beer than it is to grind grain, mix it, and bake it. Nintendo. This company was actually created in 1889. Oreos. I was shocked to learn that Oreos predate chocolate chip cookies, sliced bread, and my 100-year-old great-grandmother. Brain surgery. In 1997, archaeologists discovered an ancient tomb in the French village of Incision from 5000 BS, which contained the decomposing body of a 50-year-old man with holes in his skull. After a thorough examination, it was determined that the holes, located near the frontal lobe, were caused by a type of surgery, not by forced trauma, and the operation appears to have been successful because the wounds healed before the patient's death. To this day, however, researchers cannot say for sure what exactly the surgery was trying to fix. Contact lenses. Leonardo da Vinci had the idea of contact lenses in 1508, and the first successful contact lenses were made in 1888. National Geographic was founded in 1888. Paul Rudd. Beer. It's one of the oldest prepared drinks in the world. It not only predates every civilization, but actually contributed to their creation. Stonehenge. It predates the oldest pyramid in Egypt by nearly 300 years. Oxford University. It's older than the Aztec Empire. Trees. There are a lot of trees that are way older than you would expect. Social media. Well, the ancient Romans had a system where they used slaves as scribes and messengers in order to share gossip and art poetry and news updates with friends in their social circle. The sentiment that modern society is degenerate and that the youth are to blame is one of the oldest things we have written down that I can remember off the top of my head. Cato the elder complained that the younger generations were becoming too Greek, and Socrates used to complain that the younger generations were ruining their brains by writing instead of memorizing information. There are far more older examples, but those are the oldest I remember. Maybe Socrates was onto something pedant. A few people have pointed out the Socrates thing is a misquote, so maybe pseudesopicates was onto something instead. For a lot of us, our civilized known for a while that I'm older now than my mom and dad were when I was born, but the other day I realized I actually have memories of them when they were younger than I am now. That's proper weird to think about and really made me think I'm a little older than I feel. That said, my parents are older than I think too. They're only a few years away from the age I remember mine and granted being the year 1990, we are as close to it as we are the year 2050. The food at the back of your cupboard. Netflix, I feel like it is only a few years old, but it was invented in 1997. Your nipples are older than your teeth. Cruise control, power windows, and automatic headlights. I saw all three on a 1955 Cadillac. Oh, and the radio on it had a seek function. Google, Reddit, YouTube. It's hard to imagine that they already have been around for 15 years, with Google actually being around 20 years old. Entire generation has now grown up that cannot remember that it wasn't always there. The first carbonated drink to be sold to the public was invented by Swiss watchmaker and amateur scientist J. Schwepp in 1783, who sold his delicious sparkling water to thirsty customers in Geneva. In just 7 years, he was doing business so fast that he moved the factory to London and introduced a new flavor, sparkling lemon, to stand out from competitors who were trying to imitate his drink. Jennifer Lopez. Betty White. The use of concrete. Its use goes as far back as the Mayans, but more notably in Egyptian construction as well as in Rome. The Romans had an arguably greater concrete mix than we currently have, but that was never passed down. Eventually, the use of concrete fell out of popularity for centuries, as we seemingly lost the information needed to create it, as if the recipe was thrown out and nobody wrote it down. Also Samuel L. Jackson. The man is 71 years old, but looks like he hasn't aged in decades. Just to add on to this, Roman concrete is not only more eco-friendly, as Ubianurfsky mentions, but it was actually more durable and became sturdier over time. The concrete we make today is made with Portland cement, which is a cocktail of silica sand, limestone, clay, and other goodies. The process to make this has a large carbon offset and isn't great for the environment. Another downside to using this method is that the world is running out of silica sand very fast. Silica sand, or industrial sand, white sand, is primarily composed of quartz. This is a chemically inert mineral with a solid hardness, which makes it highly desired for the specific use of making concrete. Regular sand, like desert sand, has many more impurities like potassium, iron, carbonate, and other stuff that makes it more reactive and gives it a darker color. A more reactive sand is bad for a concrete mix and will make the structure more prone to cracks and failure over time, whereas a chemically inert mineral like quartz is just what the doctor ordered. Silica sand has many uses like water filtration systems, glass and ceramic work, sand blasting, and industrial uses, like making high-grade concrete. With the world's supply of silica sand running dry at an alarming rate, with some countries like Vietnam at risk of running out of sand as soon as 2022, there is a need to find an alternative method. The Romans created concrete after possibly seeing the natural results through something called tough rocks. This is the combo of volcanic ash, lime, and seawater. Because of the addition of seawater to this mix, two very rare minerals, aluminist abermita and philipsite, grow within the concrete. These minerals actually make the concrete mix stronger over time when exposed to seawater, which is in direct opposition to what happens to Portland concrete, or basically any modern-day concrete, which erodes when exposed to seawater. We still do not know the recipe needed to make the concrete the ancient Romans made, but we can try to make it through reverse engineering and many countless experiments. Today, scientists are not only looking into this, but also an alternative to modern-day concrete because of the diminishing presence of silica sand around the world and the carbon offset created when making it, while trying to quench the high demand for concrete globally. If you think this is interesting, pick up a book or start researching. into this, and maybe you will be the one to find the solution to these problems. Like the guy who accidentally made the frosted light bulb front page yesterday, the guy who accidentally made post-it notes, or the one who solved those two calculus problems without knowing they were, at the time, famously unsolved, also front page. You could potentially stumble upon a solution to this issue and be on the front page one day. You may not get the Reddit karma for it, but you could potentially go down in history. Egosly, I can't stress enough that Samuel L. Jackson has aged so well. Sharks. As a species, they're older than the rings of Saturn. A Native American empire nearly a third of the size of the present-day United States existed in the Great Lakes region at the time the Old Testament of the Bible was thought to be written. Water. That water you're drinking is as old as the earth. Law. Roman law was so advanced that there are still large chunks of statutes in civil law countries taken pretty much directly from Roman codices written 1500 to 1000 years ago. Important maritime laws are adaptations of medieval provisions. Lots of business law statutes borrow heavily from Napoleonic laws. In common law countries, you find stuff like the Statute of Marlborough from the 1200s, still in effect, along with still relevant case law from the 1700s. The world in general. The theory that if all of the Earth's history were laid out on a calendar, our current century would only make up the last 10 seconds or so of December 31st. Always blows my mind to consider it that way. Commercial aircraft. Most are 10, 15 years old, yet a lot of people think they get replaced like cars are still very safe, though despite their age. The idea that everything's getting worse and that the world's coming to an end soon. Sure, there's new vocabulary and new science involved, but people have been sounding that pessimistical arm throughout history, not trying to deny climate change. This has also been a fact of life for a while. Touchscreen in cars. That has been around since 1986. Contraceptives such as condoms were around a very long time and made of hard leather. Queen Elizabeth. People born in 2000. Nintendo DS. A large portion of autism spectrum disorders, about 40% of them, have been in human genetics since around 14,000 BCE. Goddamn genetic bottleneck causing supercovolano eruption. Lil Jon, while in college I discovered that my old trusty pregame hype man was born the same year as my dad. I'm 30. 4 scales done we. Snap your fingers meant arthritic relief. The outline struggles with dementia and out of your mind. Shots of Metamucil. Turn down 4. Capsira. What? The 80s. They were 40 years ago, but it feels like 20 years ago. The song Friday. Technically, it's older than most third graders, having been released in 2011. The wealthiest of the ancient Minoans had very close to modern-day plumbing. The entire Minoan culture is really fascinating, not to mention their poor choice of clothing. Lol. The arrival of people in North America. Many scientists believe a sea route was used to navigate to the continent much earlier than the Bering Land Bridge. This is hard to prove, however, because any archaeological sites that could be found along shorelines are now well underwater. Light. It may only take 8 minutes for light to travel to Earth from surface of the sun, but the light bounces around inside the sun for over 10,000 years before it reaches the surface. Jared Leto. He's going to be 50 next year, but hasn't aged since the 90s. Oxford University is the oldest English-speaking university in the world. Teaching began in Oxford University in 1096 and developed rapidly from 1167, when Henry E. banned English students from attending the University of Paris. The founding of Tenochtitlan in 1325 marked the start of the Aztec civilization, which makes Oxford University more than 200 years older. Hogwarts is also 300 years older than Machu Picchu and 150 years older than the Easter Island Heads. Matchsticks. Shakira. She's 43. Humans with our intelligence and empathy and rationality. People in the past lacked education and our cumulative knowledge, but even cavemen thousands of years ago didn't differ too much from us. Cave of Forgotten Realms, a documentary about cave paintings from 30,000 years ago, really drove this home for me. The art there is so expertly rendered, it really shows a thinking and curious mind. Abolishment of slavery. It happened in the BS era as well. So since then, no one has any excuse. The dinosaurs. They didn't know what grass was. Fireworks. I have a bottle of shampoo from the door. The AIDS virus, 1959. First known case of detectable HIV in humans was 1959. It was likely around before that. The dinosaurs were older than grass, so the imagine of a triceratops grazing on a field of grass is inaccurate. Chuck Norris. The dude is 80. How we view time when video games and movies come out and are edited in some weights. Frock 64 came out about 24 years. Ago Quavin from Home Alone is 40. Among Us, Earth. The first selfie was taken in 1839. The Stanley Cup. It predates the NEL, and if you look at the history of teams that have won it, there is a year where it was entorted due to the Spanish flu pandemic. The top of it is the original trophy, but the rings on the bottom are replaced every couple of years when they fill up with names. Minecraft Elytras. By the law of conservation of mass, no mass can be created or lost, simply moved or changed into something else. Your body and all inside of it and everything in the universe for that matter has been around since the very start. Only in random atoms, etc. When we die, our bodies are recycled back into the universe to be made into something cool, like cow poo. Vibrators. A physician invented the first vibrator in the early 1880s because doctors used to treat female hysteria by bringing women to orgasm. Paul Rudd and Gwen Stefani are both older than Ted Cruz. Ourselves. I turned 23 today, but man, I still feel like I was 18 yesterday. Santa Fe, list capital city in America, being declared the capital of the New Mexican territory by the Spanish crown in 1610, making it 410 years old, far older than the US itself. MetLife Insurance was founded in 1868, Prudential in 1875. Conspiracy theorist Bill Burr always says, go to any big city. The two biggest buildings will be insurance companies and banks. A bit different answer, but ancient people. A lot of times you hear people talk about the life expectancy of ancient people being around 35. So you picture a really young society when you think of the Romans, Egyptians, Mesopotamians, or even hunter-gatherers. This isn't really the case. The average is 35 because infant mortality and early childhood death was so common. If you just take the life expectancy of people who reach adulthood 16, then the life expectancy is easily in the early 60s. There were plenty of 70 and even 80-year-olds 2,000 years ago. We are farther from the release date of the first Back to the Future movie than Marty was from 1955. Yo mama. The heliostenic model and atomic theory. Aristarchus first came up with the heliostenic model 2 centuries before the birth of Jesus, and Leucippus proposed atomics 5 centuries before the birth of Jesus. When we say the Greeks were the basis of Western culture, the more you learn, the more you discover how true that really is. We spent 2 millennia catching up to where the Greeks were at. In my experience, a lot of people I know personally don't realize that music cassettes were invented in the 60s. Cassettes didn't really take off in the States until the late 70s, but the first albums released on cassettes hit shelves in 1966. Pornography, as we know it today, predates sliced bread by at least 50 years. The oldest surviving hardcore porn film is, of course, a French film called Likud, or Lab on Auberg, and was released in 1908. Aboriginal Australians.